What's up, guys? Today I just want to take you through how I process a photograph in Lightroom and Photoshop to take what is a pretty dull, rainy image and make it super cool. Let's get started. So here we are again in Lightroom. Let's take a look at this photo from a really rainy evening in Post Office Square in Boston. Pretty cool shot. Things I like about it, this building where they've added on this super modern like upper level above this really great kind of old school Boston lower level. I just love this. The shot from this direction. I actually shot this. I shot this handheld, standing in the middle of the street. I hit the crosswalk button, stopped halfway across, and just fired off a few shots. This is actually from a bracket set, and I chose one that looks like it has most of the highlight area intact. It needs a lot of work. It needs work on tone. It needs work on perspective. And I think I really want to draw the eye here into this building, which is what I care about. So let's get to it. Step one, pop into the Develop module, and let's do some work in Lightroom. For a shot like this, so I want to fix the perspective. So it's a good idea, if you know you're going to do that, to actually do that first. Because when you fix the perspective, it's going to change the crop, and you'll want to see what that final composition will look like before you start diving into more picky changes. So coming into the transform panel, what I like to do is use this little guided upright tool. And so all you have to do is draw a line along something that should be vertical or horizontal, like this, and then one, and then another one. You need two, so usually try to find one on one side and one on the other side. And then like magic, it's fixed. So now all of the vertical lines are vertical, but you see that because of the warp that's necessary to kind of get everything upright, you have these sort of missing pieces. And you can ask Lightroom to fix that for you by checking off Constrain Crop. Done. Now for this, so there's like so much of this big empty sky that I don't care about. I think what I'm actually going to do is crop it further, and I'll just go ahead and go to a 4:5 crop, which is perfect for Instagram. And that's the ratio that I tend to go for also when it's like really tall or really wide and I just want to lose some of that. And I think this looks okay. I might come in a little bit further and just really focus in on this cool building in the center. Maybe like right there. And I want the tip of this new building section to be right in the center, and so I've turned on these the finer grid. Pro tip: press O on the keyboard to cycle through different grid modes while you're cropping. So I like this one. I like this one for these types of like get things centered, get things horizontal or vertical. This is the default grid. It'll turn on the finer grid while you're rotating, while the mouse is held down. And you can use O to just have that on all the time. So I think I'm going to go with this crop. I think this is a pretty good start. So now let's get into tone. So here in the tone panel, first things first, let's check the temperature. I actually like this right about there. Not too cool, but not too warm. As usual, dive into the blacks and use the Alt or Option key to see what is going to be completely black in this image. I am cool with a bunch of jet black in this image. You see there's none even in the subject area. So that's going to draw your eye away from all of those boring edge elements that I don't care about anyway. Whites, same story. We're going to go up until we see that it's all blown out, and then back off just a bit. I think somewhere in there is probably good. And then we'll take the highlights down, which should give me a lot more character in that sort of foggy cloud sky area. We're seeing a little bit more of the front tip of that building as well. I think I like that. Overall exposure is probably fine. I'm just going to leave that where it is. Clarity, I'll maybe give it just a touch of clarity. I try to be a soft touch. I use a soft touch with clarity in Lightroom. Usually if I round trip through Photoshop, I'm going to do all sorts of tonal contrast adjustment, and clarity will just add too much. So I try to just use a little bit if I think it helps the sort of overall sharpness. Cool, so this is looking good. This is looking good. So now what I want to do is I actually want to give this building a lot more focal attention. So let's use some local adjustments in Lightroom. Local adjustments in Lightroom are way more powerful than people give them credit for. I think what we're going to do is start with a big radial mask here, and let's just drop the exposure outside of it, which is basically like a really large vignette. That's great. Let's make a new one. And let's come in just to the building area right here. Like this, maybe like that. Invert, which basically makes the outside the mask and the inside the affected area. And then we'll actually maybe warm that up a little bit. And a little more clarity on that area. And that's pretty good. Before and after. Before and after. That's not bad. Cool. I think I actually want to use some gradient masks here to go even darker on the sides. And I'll just make this kind of a long enough gradient that it's not too obvious what's going on. Let's move this over here. Do the same thing this way. Starting to look a little bit obvious. And then let's have another one kind of this way. And this one can be really tall. And I got it backwards. Okay. How's that looking? Before and after. Before and after. I like it. Okay, now what this thing is missing now, I think, is more interest in the sky. The sky is just very, very blank and empty. And I would like to see something happen there. And I'm still distracted by some of these edge elements, and I sort of wish I had shot this at a more open aperture, but you gotta work with what you got. Let's see what we can do in Photoshop. First things first. Let's see about adding some cool kind of texture to the sky. I like to first rename the background layer. We'll just call this base raw. So what I've done is I've actually gone online and downloaded this smoke photo from Unsplash. So let's just add this in here. Now obviously this looks insane because it's all different colors, but we'll fix that in a minute. So what I want is basically for that smoke to come through and show through here where the sky is. And then I'm going to adjust the scale of it and desaturate it and all of that. So at first we just need a mask. And once again, I'm going to use this great Lumenzia plugin from Greg Benz. It's not free, but it's cheap and it's worth every penny. Let's start with like a pretty wide highlights. I think this is good. I think 3 is good. And then I like to just tweak the levels a little bit more, because I really want all of that sky to show through and as little of the buildings to be affected as possible. Although it's probably okay for it to bleed through the buildings a little bit, almost as if the sky is reflecting off the windows or something. So I don't know, find a spot in here that feels right. I think that's okay. and we'll just apply to a selection. We'll create a selection. And then what I'll do is I'll group this and apply that selection as a mask to the group. Great. So now we're way better off already. There's our crazy clouds. And I think maybe what we'll do first is scale it down somewhat. Cool, I think that looks good. And then we want to desaturate it, so let's just do a hue saturation layer here and drop the saturation to nothing. And then let's adjust the opacity of this entire group. Before, after, before, after. This is not bad. It adds a little bit of interest. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, finally, to reduce the distraction from some of these edge elements, let's actually blur it out. And this is one of my favorite things to do. We'll just create a flattened layer, and then we'll convert this layer for smart filters. And then we'll go into Blur Gallery, Field Blur. And in the Field Blur, basically what you get is these little thumbtacks, and you can move these tacks around on the image and tell it how much to blur each area. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create some thumbtacks around the edges with blur applied. And let this center be sharp. I think we'll create another one here with no blur. And then here on the outside, we can make that something like 20. And hit OK. So now we've basically come from this tonally adjusted image from Lightroom to this much more interesting, focused composition in Photoshop.